I'm Kristen Childs. I'm the co-host for today. I head up internal communications for the IoT team and also communications and marketing for women at Silicon Labs. So thank you so much for being here. And Mela Desma, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mela Desma. I co-chair the Women at Silicon Labs with Holly Ammerman. She will introduce herself later. But I'm a technical writer for TechBubs. And you'll be hearing from me again. But let's talk to Holly.
Thanks everyone for joining. I'm Holly, co-chair of the Women at Scilabs. Happy International Women's Day week. And I'm excited to hear from Phyllis. I've been doing habitat builds, well, for a while. Not recently, but in the past, I was able to do them more often. So I'm excited for this talk.
Awesome.
Okay, so, yes, I will start sharing my screen because there's something I gotta show everyone. Just do that. Everyone can see my screen. Okay, awesome. So let me, okay. Okay, again, good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone, wherever in the world you are. Belated Happy International Women's Day. If you missed the amazing video that many of us collaborated with to put together, it is now available on our social media pages. Lots of beautiful, inspiring messages packed in one video. You really wouldn't want to miss it. Speaking of inspiration, thank you for taking the time to be here with us for another dose of inspiration as we have this conversation with Phyllis Snodgrass. It's really nice to see everyone. Again, I'm Mela. That's my co-chair, the Women at Scilabs ERG with Holly Emmerman. And here with us is Kristen Childs, our marketing and communications lead. She will also moderate the actual conversation with Phyllis later. So I know everyone is excited to hear Phyllis talk, but just for housekeeping purposes and to be respectful of everyone's time, this is an hour event. We might use all the time or not, depending on the amount of questions we will have. We will start with a quick intro about Austin Habitat for Humanity and a sneak peek on Phyllis and her bio. We've allocated about 40 minutes on a Q&A session, which will be moderated by Kristen. If you have questions, please do send it on the chat box. Holly and I will be moderating those questions, and depending on the question, we will respectfully chime in to ask your questions during the conversation. We can also wait at the end to ask these questions for you, or better yet, you can unmute yourself to ask Phyllis directly after the Q&A session. So let's talk about Austin Habitat for Humanity and its project, The House That Tech Built. The Habitat believes that everyone deserves a decent, affordable place to live, so they bring people together to build homes, communities, and hope. One of their projects is called The House That Tech Built, where the Habitat partners with community-minded tech companies like Silicon Labs that want to give back through sponsorships and team-building volunteer opportunities, and then address the growing need for affordable housing. I am proud to say that Silicon Labs have been a sponsor of Habitat since 2005 and have supported the House That Tech Built for 7 years now. On average, we volunteer between 5 to 6 volunteer days every year, and that is at 25 employees per build. And we're doing it again this year. We have set volunteering schedules for this year, but it's still pending work status. If you're interested or have questions on volunteering opportunities for the Habitat, you may send a Teams message or email Heather Bernard. By the way, that card on the top right corner, that was sent to us by the Habitat and the family that we've helped build a house for last year. I don't know about you, but that truly warms my heart. It's like inspiring. So let's talk about Phyllis and her amazing work, not just as the CEO of Habitat, but just overall a leader in community engagement for almost 2 decades. When I first heard Jackie talk about Phyllis, I can really sense the excitement and awe around her. It made me think, this woman seems too good to be true. But then I looked through her bio and stalked her on LinkedIn basically, and I understood. I mean, look at this. I cannot whistle, I cannot. But trust me, I am whistling in my brain for sure. In her 17-year career in the Chamber of Commerce, she played very important roles and have impacted the community greatly that earned her the Executive Leadership Award from the Austin Chamber of Commerce in August 2018. She also maximized the Habitat's impact on affordability that she was named a top CEO in Austin by the Austin Business Journal in October 2019. And she doesn't stop there. Aside from being the CEO of Habitat, she's now serving on the U.S. Council for Habitat for Humanity International and is also a member of Austin Area Research Organization. Yes, this is a real person I'm speaking of, and you will meet her very soon, like right now. So take it away, Kristen.
That was such an awesome intro. Thank you, May. And now it was my pleasure to officially introduce Phyllis Snodgrass, CEO of Austin Habitat for Humanity. Thank you so much again for joining us today. We're so excited to have you here, especially on the week of International Women's Day during Women's History Month. It'd be so fantastic to hear from an inspiring female leader like yourself. So before we talk about that, your experience as a female leader, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the organization. Can you tell us about Habitat's origin story and its roots in the social justice movement?
Oh, I love the opportunity to talk about that. So thank you so much for asking that question. I even wrote some notes about it because it's such a cool story and I didn't want to get any of it wrong. A lot of people have heard the Habitat for Humanity founding story of Millard and Linda Fuller, and I'd love to share that. But even before Millard and Linda began what is called Habitat for Humanity, there was a gentleman named Clarence Jordan. He lived in a farming community in Americus, Georgia, and he was a biblical scholar, lived in this kind of little podunk town, but like knew Greek and he was an amazing preacher, wrote some great works. I've read some of his stuff. He founded a community farm. It was a social experiment where Blacks and whites would live together, farming, building homes together, living in community together, eating at the dinner table together, sharing their resources together. I mean, if you were going to be biblical, they were living it. They were living the values of sharing your resources and loving your neighbor at a time where that wasn't done. No one was doing this. This was a time when that didn't exist. And he just stepped out in faith, knowing what was the right thing to do. The principle of white and Black families living and farming together as equals. Moved to, this is called Koinonia Farms, and so it still exists. It's kind of the birthplace of Habitat, and our official headquarters are partly in Atlanta and partly in Koinonia, which is right down the road from Atlanta, Georgia. Millard Fuller was a young man who was going to make his millions by the time he was 30 years old. I mean, he had this goal in his mind. He was very driven, very success-oriented. He's going to make his money on Wall Street, and he did it. He got out there. He was a super achiever. He got into New York City. He made his money, and by the time he was 30, $1 million was a lot more then than it is today. You know, he was effectively a millionaire. He was very successful, but his marriage was falling apart and his life was falling apart, and really just kind of goes to show that chasing money is never going to really solve your problems. You're never going to make enough money. I mean, how many of us have gotten that raise and said, okay, when I get to this level, everything's going to be fine. And are we ever really satisfied with that level? We always need that next level and that next. And he found out at that very early age that just wasn't making him happy. In fact, he was miserable and his life was falling apart. He heard about Clarence and went to visit him on the farm. And just was so moved by this community of people living together. And he actually said spending a weekend with Clarence was like 3 years in a seminary. And he ended up selling all of his possessions, moving in with Clarence. Eventually, after some soul searching, some travel to Africa and doing some missionary work, came back. And Clarence and he just wanted to do something bigger, even than Koinonia Farms. They came up with this idea of Fund for Humanity, where that they would build these homes that people would pay them off. They would go in a fund to build future homes. It eventually became Habitat for Humanity. and Millard and Fuller moved on from Clarence to form this organization that's become this worldwide place where really people come together from all backgrounds, from all faiths, and from all belief systems to support each other and love each other and build homes together for those that need them. So I love the story. Thank you for letting me share that.
That's such a cool story. I love that. And what year was this?
1942 was
1942.
Farms.
Wow, that's really amazing. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's a really special.
Pre-civil rights movement.
Yeah.
I mean, there was Martin Luther King Jr. was frankly afraid to go to Queenia Farms. It was that bad. I mean, they suffered so much persecution. Houses were burned down. They weren't allowed to buy groceries in the local stores. The church turned them away. They were excommunicated from the local church because they were, living in community together at a time when that was not accepted in the culture. It was. I mean, they faced so much opposition doing what they knew was the right thing to do. Clarence walked in with a Bible and said, "Show me in the Bible where it says that whites and blacks should not live together." And the deacon said, "Put that away. Don't be showing any Bible to me."
Oh my God.
Yeah, so the story goes on and on. His story is fantastic. I'd love for anybody wants to. I'll share his book, but it's a great story.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be great if you could share it with us afterwards. That would be a great read. Thanks for sharing that. What a really fascinating, cool history, and what guts that must have taken to pull off in 1942. Well, I can understand why you would want to work for Habitat for Humanity with such a passionate mission. And, kind of on that note, so May talked about your really interesting background, 17 years in the Chamber of Commerce, and then, now your role for CEO for Habitat of Humanity. So how did that come to be? How did you sort of go from 17 years in that into the nonprofit industry?
The story goes back a little further than that, because I spent probably the first 15 years before that as a CPA in real estate accounting, and graduated with an accounting degree. I did it because that's where the jobs were. I don't know how many tech people are at Silicon Labs because that's where the jobs are. So I totally understand that when that's a thing. And so I went there because that's where the jobs were. But honestly, I wasn't fulfilled in it. And but I didn't let it stop me. I always felt like every place I went, I learned something. And people today will look at my resume and think I planned out this whole career path. Boy, she just had this planned out. She did real estate accounting, and then she did this nonprofit work, and she did community development, and then she went to Habitat. And I believe we all have a path, and we need to be open to following that path that presents itself. And it's going to have some unusual opportunities. We're going to have jobs and assignments throughout that are going to actually teach us something we're going to need later. And you're not going to know till years and years later why you learned that lesson where you were at. And so that is really the truth of every single step along the way. Prepared me for this job. And so I did those years, but during that whole time I was soul searching, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I couldn't see myself staying a CPA forever. Ended up in the Chamber of Commerce world. Long story, we get into that later. But the Chamber of Commerce world to the Habitat world was a very natural transition for me. I was already in a nonprofit space, although it wasn't a charitable nonprofit. I was already having to ask for money, plan events, manage people, work with the board of directors, work with volunteers, do all kinds of fundraising. So all the things you would need to do to step into this role. I didn't necessarily know construction, although I had been a CFO of a real estate company. But I didn't necessarily know all the work around affordable housing. But at a CEO level, at a leadership level, you don't necessarily have to be able to physically do the work. You need to be able to lead the people that are doing the work. And so when I was interviewed and asked, why do you think you can do this job? Of course, my first thought was, you asked me to come interview 4 years headhunter had come to me. So I'm like, okay. But my, my response was, I've prepared myself to lead people, and I'm going to get the right people in the right seats to do the job. And it's my job to steward them. And so it ended up here. And it was the perfect next step. I had no idea what that next step was going to be. I never imagined myself leaving the chamber world. I thought I'd found what I would do till I retired. And then when this came, I knew instantly this was the next step.
So they approached you?
I actually haven't looked for a job almost since I got my first job.
Wow.
One of my leadership lessons, which we can talk about, but I interviewed for that first job in college and thankfully got it because it was the only offer I got. So very happy to get the job. It was the one I wanted, but I was very naive. I grew up in a family, very blue collar family. Nobody had ever gone to college. There was no one suggesting that I go to college. I had no one supporting it. I worked my way through. My mother's idea of, a job or career advice was that I should marry a mechanic because my car kept breaking down. There just wasn't any support for this direction I was headed. So, I stepped into that world, the professional world, with really just no bearings, not knowing what I was in for.
That's really interesting. So having, gone through these sort of career transitions and having, been approached by, different organizations and kind of going through some of this career pathing, I think for a lot of people, particularly women, we're often intimidated by, oh, well, this is a different career for me. This is a different industry for me. I'm probably not qualified for it. So can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the, takeaways, your best advice for navigating career transitions?
Well, I will say for years, I suffered from imposter syndrome. And I've shared this with my kids and they don't believe me. They look at a resume and they see the jobs I've had and they just can't fathom that mom didn't feel successful. I did a really good job of portraying that I was comfortable in those roles. But I will tell you, I really was an imposter in that first job. I can remember the interview, which I didn't know which fork to pick up, in the restaurant. I was so intimidated and over my head. And so I spent a lot of time looking at the people around me to try to, some people will look to mentors, but I actually was looking at my coworkers, who's doing this successfully? What are they doing? What can I be doing? And that whole path of learning and imitating and there's so many good books on this now, but there weren't really at the time. So I was just kind of swimming my way through that sea of uncertainty.
Fake it till you make it. Yeah.
Fake it till you make it is a thing, and I did it. But but I would never shied away from work. That didn't scare me. I was willing to do what other people might not have been willing to do. I never said no to an assignment. To this day, the one thing that will just set me off, and very little sets me off with employees. I am a super compassionate person to work for. But if you tell me it's not my job, that does not go well with me at all. That is just not something I stomach well. And because everything I've ever done has taught me something. If it was standing at a copier copying all night for a partner to put a presentation together and just reading the stuff while I was doing it, I either had time to think about stuff that was going on in my life, or actually, as I was standing there, reading whatever it was that they were putting through,
right,
beginning to understand the pressures they were under. But every step along the way has taught me something that's made me who I am today. So I'm thankful for all of it, even the painful parts.
Yeah. Sometimes the painful parts, as hard as they are, the biggest takeaways, the biggest lessons in your life that you can go forward with. So
the fear, that very first move from the CPA firm, the International Real Estate Accounting CPA firm, it's now merged with Ernst & Young and it's their real estate arm. But moving from there to the CFO of a small real estate company, scared to death, knew I was in over my head, wasn't sure I knew what to do, but a friend told me, she said, what is the worst thing that can happen? You know?
Right.
And once you accept that, and just know, like, well, okay, you know, I could fail, I could start over again. And once
Right.
you can accept that worst thing, you just put that behind you and you just plunge in and move forward. My next step was to FDIC, and it was, again, somebody for the first job called me to the second job, and then somebody from the first job called me to the third job, and that just kept happening. And I think that the thread of all that throughout is building relationships is so critical. It's not
Right.
just doing your job. It's about building relationships with the people that you work with, because those are what will open up doors for you. So many people are, I know my job and I'm really good at it, and they produce this resume with all this stuff, but they've not taken the time to value the people around them and learn from those people and build relationships with them. That has opened career doors for me. I mean, I am not the most brilliant person in the world, but I work hard, and I am willing to, you know, I just reach out to people and have friends from every single job I've ever had, still have friends from all of them, and we still stay in touch, and that's what builds a career.
Absolutely. No, that's so important to you know, network and have those connections and you know, do those different parts of different jobs and learn and grow and, you know, work your butt off and, you know, excel. That's so interesting. So was the CFO role your first leadership role? And can you kind of talk about, you know, what advice would you give to women who are interested in maybe pursuing a leadership role for the first time, regardless of industry?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, the CFO was my first leadership role, and leaving, well, I guess as I got promoted to, so in the accounting world, you start out as a staff accountant and you get promoted to senior, so you start managing people. The next step is manager. I was ready to be done at senior. I think I'd done 6 months of a job, a really tough job where our work hours were over 80 hours a week. I was actually working more overtime than straight time for 6 entire months.
Wow.
Paid off student loans, but I was so burned out after that. I was like, I have to do something else. And this opportunity came up, and it's like, okay. But you know, managing people, you know, that was a challenge. You know, it was scary, that first leadership role in a C-suite position, and it was a smaller company. So granted, I had been in the working world 3 years, to move directly into a CFO role was a great move at that point. I knew that was going to be good for my resume. It was going to be good for career building. Still wasn't sure I wanted to stay in accounting, so I wasn't sure I was going to. But what I learned from that, and then for my next job at FDIC on the leadership team when all the banks were failing, was that even though I didn't necessarily like the day-to-day, as you moved up in the leadership role, you were doing less of the day-to-day, and it's more about leading people. And so I was like, okay, I like this part. I'm not having to do the ticking and tying and making everything look perfect. You know, I actually enjoy the people part and the managing, and then just as you get in a leadership role, you just get to do so many more things. I mean, I would find myself at the city of Fort Worth pulling permits for a development we were doing, or on the phone with a Philippine investor in the middle of the night, because sometimes, I'm sure you guys deal with this too, you're international partners and you have to get on the calls with them at whatever time is daytime for them. And, you know, all those wonderful experiences I got to have just because I accepted that position, that grew me for the next job, gave me more confidence. And so it builds, it all builds.
And what's your management style or your leadership style? How do you like to lead people?
We have 3 core values here, which really reflect, you know, where I work from, and being collaborative is super important to us and to me. You know, being able to work together. That doesn't mean I'm not going to make some decisions at times that are unpopular, because you're going to have to come down on where we're going to be, and I'm just going to have to suck it up and do it. But listening to that input, I've just got so many smart people here, and if I can get their feedback, we're going to get to the right answer. So collaborative and having the teams collaborate, not work at cross purposes with each other, but listen to each other. Being a servant leader, I don't know if that has come out, but that is very important to me. It comes from my faith background. It just comes from who I am. One of the things that draws me to Habitat is it just, that inspires people. The people that are drawn to work here, typically that is a motivator for them. And so that's one of our core values. And just forward thinking, we always got to be thinking about what's next. I've always got to be thinking about what we want the end of this year to look like. And I think that's what I learned as I moved into that first professional job that I have carried with me, as I would start out the year going, how do I want this year to end? And I've made this pact with myself. Every year during the Christmas holidays, I take some time off and I set my goals, my personal goals, my professional goals for the next year. I block off time on my calendar to make those things happen. And then I go back at the end of the year to reflect and see, did those things happen? And I know for certain, if I hadn't been intentional, if you've been to some place before, it's a whole lot quicker when you get there, because then that first time you take the trip. So if you can already vision yourself getting to the end of that road, it's going to make that trip a whole lot easier. And so I figure out what I want this year to end up like. It's not always going to be perfect. And then I kind of vision the path that's going to get me there.
I love that. That's a really interesting way of thinking about it. Yeah. How do I want, thinking at the beginning of the year, how do I want this year to end? It's kind of a different way of thinking about a New Year's resolution, right?
Kind of bumbling through it and going, okay, what happened?
Yeah. Right. I just started doing vision boarding the last couple of years, and I found that to be really helpful too, is to kind of a North Star of trying to keep the path throughout the end of the year. So that's a really cool sort of take on that. I really like that. What's been your biggest professional challenge as a female? And have you seen these obstacles change over time? Have you seen them change with sort of the recent resurging of the Me Too movement? And how has this kind of gone throughout your career? Do you see any positive change happening?
I entered the CPA profession at a time where women were really just starting to get in it in force. And we were starting to see women as managers, maybe not yet as many as partners, but there's a lot of them from my generation that are partners today. So I would say I was a little bit late to that ball game of the ones that really pressed in at the beginning. I'll be frank with you, I didn't see a lot of obstacles because I was female. Maybe it was because I was too ignorant to see them. Maybe they were. I was like, I would just get in and do it. And again, for me, it always went back to relationships. Getting to know people for who they were. Being authentic with them. I've never been one to put up a facade and pretend I'm something that I'm not. So while I was trying to pretend to be a professional, perhaps, but I am who I am. I'm very transparent, and so I think that authenticity has come across in those relationships, and I just didn't see the obstacles. I think the hardest thing for me was my child raising years, and yet that was the most joyous time too. I mean, the very best memories. But I mean, I can think of many times where I showed up at work on 4 hours of sleep, and I raised 3 kids, 2 years.
Oh, wow.
I worked up until the day I had all 3 of them. Like one of them,
Wow.
I was 5 in the afternoon and was at the hospital at midnight. So, and that was a blessing, just because it was a healthy, everyone's pregnancy doesn't always work that way. And that was at a time where there wasn't, you could take maternity leave, you could save up your sick leave and take off. But I wasn't working in a place where they were very open to that. It was a lot of men, but they were super supportive of it. I mean, they threw me a shower in the best fashion that a group of guys could. That was pretty great memory. and so I never really saw it so much as an obstacle, but I also know it was harder for me because I was being a mom and a wife and a professional.
Yeah. How did you manage the work-life balance with that?
I didn't. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't sleep, and I didn't, it was, there's things you just have to give up. I mean, it was like I would work all day, come home. I mean, you can't spend the time. I kind of knew that my career wasn't going to advance as quickly during some of those years because I couldn't put in the time. I couldn't stay late. I couldn't, I mean, I worked all day, came home, took care of kids till a certain point. Then if they were sick, I was up with them. And there was always something. There was childcare. There was something. So there was just those challenges of that. But it also I grew resilient children. And I was super fortunate because I waited till I was about 30 to have my first. I was moving up in a professional career. And by the time I had my third child, I had moved into the chamber career, was moving into the chamber career. And so if you're CEO of a nonprofit and your child gets sick, we didn't have computers to take home then, but you could
Right.
They weren't something you would take home, but you could actually, I would bring my sick child to work. I'd have a little throw up pan in my,
Yep.
bag on the floor and their toy and their stuff. And I was taking care of the child while at work. My mom was super helpful during that time when she could do that. And, you work your way through it, but the kids grew up in the environment of service. And if they were off for a few days, they were at the office with me stuffing envelopes or
Oh, wow. That's great.
set up for events. They thought mom's job was going to meetings and throwing parties. And
Not quite, but
Not
that's
quite.
fantastic. Yeah.
I remembered the balloons and the party favors.
Right. That's funny. That's so cool. And what are they doing now? How old are your kids now?
So they are, okay. So I have to back up. I'll be 60 this year, which means my oldest will be 28 this year, which means my middle will be 26 this year, which means my daughter will be 24. Isn't that terrible? That's how I have to count it down.
And are they in the nonprofit world?
No. The one thing they all decided was that I worked really hard and they weren't going to work that hard. So
there's a lot of hard work in the nonprofit world for sure.
I work really hard. The boys are in tech. One works for Sedera, one works for Open Lending. My daughter is is just about to complete occupational therapy. She took a bit of a stint, did 2 years of ministry on campus with Crew at UT after graduating. She would be my scholar. I think she made 1B in college. And I remember her last semester, she said, I am going to do the bare minimum this semester to make an A. And I was just like, but,
great.
yeah, they're awesome and so much joy. And I say women can do it all, but you do have to pace yourself and you do have to be realistic. And
yeah,
I just incorporated it into my life, but I also now try to have a workplace that's very family friendly. We have 3 moms here that are nursing now. We make time for people to be at home with their families, and we are very flexible when they've got issues at home. And, it's important to us to care for our people because those of us that have been through it ourselves and know how difficult it was want to make sure that we surround people with what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great to hear. And, you've talked a lot about the importance of developing relationships with people throughout your career and how that's really kind of led you to this place. Are there any specific mentors or allies that have been inspirational to you throughout your journey and that have had a strong impact on your personal or professional life, or resources that have really helped you that have kind of helped guide the way?
I thought a lot about this over the years because it's been every step of the way. Again, my mentors at the first job were my coworkers who
Yeah.
I've been friends for years. I mean, literally, they were the people I looked up to because I'm like, they know what they're doing. I'm lost here. How do they behave? How do they dress? What are, you know? And then over time, you know, my bosses. It wasn't until I moved out of the accounting world, I think, and into, I had my own business for a bit between accounting and being a CPA, being in chambers of commerce, where I was a CPA in a small town, which was going back to doing the work again. And then I really realized, that was the point where I really realized I'd love to run my own business. I had a lot of respect for people that ran businesses, but you got to do something you enjoy if you're going to do that. And so I liked the leading of people. I didn't actually like doing the accounting work. So that was miserable.
Fair enough.
But
Yeah.
but what it did force me to do was build a business. And in that, actually, I was doing some volunteer work for a chamber of commerce and found out about the job. And that was when I made that jump and that leap into the chamber world. But I, at that time, was volunteering for the Heart Association and the American Red Cross and my church and other nonprofits in the community. And, you know, trying to build a business, I knew I was going to have to speak in public. So I got in Toastmasters and met people through that. And those experiences outside of work probably started growing me more to the professional I am today and the people I met there. You know, women and men who volunteered in the community, brought so much skills into that role. You know, they taught me how to fundraise. They taught me how not to be afraid to ask people for money for a good cause. They taught me how to organize things and run events. And I started learning all that through my volunteer work before I ever even saw the Chamber of Commerce job. And that was that growth period that helped me realize this is what I want to do. This is where I'm meant to serve. And then all on the way, the chamber world, I mean, it's just full of people. You know, it is a people business, you know,
Yeah.
you're trying to build members. So it's all about relationships. And I just got to meet so many incredible people that I would have never met or come in contact with had I not done that work for that many years. And so just as far as mentors, I mean, just almost too numerous to mention, just so many people along the way that have been inspirational, that have been supportive. And to this day, I can call up and go, I'm facing this problem. What would you do?
Yeah, that's great. I want to go back to something you kind of talked about a little bit earlier, which is imposter syndrome. Do you feel like there was ever, because that's something I think we all experience, and to your point, there's, you know, a lot more resources and there's a name for it now. I think fake it till you make it was a name for it for a long time, but now it's been recognized as an actual thing for a lot of people, particularly women. Do you feel like there's ever a point where you got over your imposter syndrome?
I did. I'm almost embarrassed to say it was about 8 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I literally, that's been my entire life of
Yeah.
just waking up in the middle of the night, fearful that somebody tomorrow is going to figure out that I don't know what I'm doing. And this is all going to end. And it's all going to collapse underneath me. And I can't tell you how many of those night sweats and middle of the night experiences I had. In fact, I remember a lady at FDIC told me, well, what I do when that happens is I just get up and clean house.
Oh my gosh.
And I've started doing that. I was like, well, I was 2 a.m, at least I would work it out, you know, work that energy out of my system. But for me personally, it's been my own faith journey. And as I've grown closer to the Lord, and I get up every morning, spend time in the Bible, spend time meditating and reading and thinking about my day and really centering myself. That quiet time without people has grounded me and really given me the strength to know that, you know, I'm enough and I'm here for a reason and I'm here to serve. And I just want to be open to what it is I'm to do today. You know,
Yeah.
what is my calling? Who are the people that I'm going to have put in my path that I need to help or serve? How is today going to be a better day than yesterday? And what gifts can I bring to help make that happen? And when I do that, if I miss a day, my day just goes off the rails. But when I stay centered, and then if the day doesn't go as well, I mean, sometimes I have to just take time in the evening to reflect on it. And I try not to just make it the beginning and the end of the day. One thing I used to do was check my faith at the door. I would do my stuff in the morning and I would get to work. And I'm like, okay, shut that off, you know. And if I'm getting overwhelmed, I'll just get up and leave and walk around the building a couple of times and just reset myself and remember why I'm here and remember that I'm part of something bigger. And come back renewed and ready to go. Deep breathing helps a lot.
It does. You talk, and first of all, as soon as you start talking about, you know, imposter syndrome, I'm looking up and I see a lot of like nodding heads from a lot of people on this conversation, because I think we all feel that way to some extent, you know. And so it's really refreshing to hear that coming from, you know, a successful leader like yourself, and knowing that, you know, I think this is something that we all are challenged with. And I just recently started, you know, in the last year or so, having some quiet time to myself in the morning too, meditating. It really helps, you know, focus on the day. And yeah, when things get stressful, just taking a deep breath and walking away for a second. We're actually reading a book in our Women at Silicon Labs a book group called Burnout: The Secret to Managing the Stress Life Cycle, I think is the name of it, which has been a really cool read so far, and kind of talks a lot about some of these sort of similar things. But I know we're getting to almost 8:45, and I'd love to open up the floor to anyone who has any questions that they would like to ask Phyllis. This has been such a great conversation, and I think you've really given us a lot to think about. So is there anybody out there who would like to unmute themselves and ask a question, or put a question in the chat? Or I was going to say you can raise your hand.
Can I raise my hand? Can I ask a question?
Ask a question.
Hi again, Phyllis. You know, I'm such a huge fan of the work that Habitat does in our community. So obviously, I always, when I'm talking to you or talking to your team, I'm always talking about it from the nonprofit lens. And it's so amazing to speak with you this morning, to hear you speak this morning, really from sort of the depth and breadth of your experience as a professional and as a woman. So thank you so much for doing that. One of the things that you said that really resonated with me, I know you've mentioned a couple times, is that how we can learn from and are mentored by those around us. And I think there's kind of this concept of mentorship that is often assumed to be hierarchical rather than lateral. So what's some advice you can give for all of us to sort of how you can listen and how you can actually absorb or interact with the folks around you who might be more like, quote unquote, on your level, to learn and to grow?
Absolutely. I think that listening is a really big part of that. I mean, there are some fundamentals that I really push into my people constantly. One is always assuming best intent. So critical in the workplace. We go into these conversations where we're not on the same page with someone, and we make up these stories in our head about what they're thinking. It's like, and most of the time they aren't true. And so, and then sometimes maybe they are true, but maybe there's something else going on in their life that day. I mean, or this has triggered something in them from an earlier time and another experience that we don't even know we've set off. And so I just being open to that. Cross team relationships, not just spending time with the people on your own team that do the same work you do, but spending time with people in other teams that do different things is going to give you a totally different perspective. And pressing in on relationships. I think book studies are a great way to do this. For me, it's also been pressing into other people in the same industry. In chamber world, it was just, I still have tons of friends from that world that led chambers across the state and across the country. And, you know, our relationships with each other, being able to lean into each other, getting to go away and attend things together, professional development, great ways to team build. We'll do some team building exercises here. Of course, we are a team building exercise at Habitat, so I don't know why we feel like we have to go axe throwing when we build houses, but yeah, we do that too. But the most authentic things happen in spontaneous. I can't even say it this morning, but you know what I'm trying to say. Spontaneously, but just
Spontaneously.
Thank you. That is the word. And
It's still early. It's very early.
It's very early.
Zevia doesn't do it. I need some caffeine. So yeah, just spending time together, and you know, I'm really pressing in on the group on books. Like I just read this great book, and that makes people jump in on it. We've been participating in GLS the last few years, the Global Leadership Summit. The first year I took my senior team with me. It's 2 days. It's not super expensive. And it gave us a lot of things to talk about, food for thought. The second year we brought in some second level team members. Actually, the second and third years we did that. Last year, because it was online, I put it up. Although we paid for 20 people, I put it online and had people gathering to watch it together from other places. So we were having, you know, safe groups and bigger rooms, and we were getting other people in. So we probably had 30, 35 out of our 75 people participate. This year, I'm really proud to announce we just decided this week we have committed to be a titled sponsor for the Global Leadership Summit here in Austin.
Oh, that's great.
It moved our team so far.
That's awesome.
It's caused us to read books, talk about really deep topics with each other, push in as leaders across the organization. And it is just, I think it's really helped our entire group. Everyone that's participated in it has grown from it. So we just felt like we're going to put a stake in the ground and say, this is important to us. We've been super blessed throughout COVID. I mean, just the donations and support that have come in have been way beyond what we were expecting. And so we really feel like, you know what, we're going to give back, and we're going to show that this is important and, you know, represent that as an organization. So we're really excited about that. More to come. I'll send you a link when it happens this
Yes, please do. That's fantastic. Thank you. And just thanks again to you. And I just want to give a special shout out to your team that's been so wonderful in keeping us connected to Habitat and its mission, even while we can't go out to the builds. And we're really, fingers crossed, hoping to be out there again this fall. So really, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I also want to call out Phyllis's background, which is a really beautiful example of some of the projects that Habitat has done. It's like a gorgeous little craftsman style house, and I kind of love it. I'm gonna build one for myself. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say a couple of years ago, was it 2018, I guess it was, I went on a global leadership build. And so I went to Vietnam for a week. That was a great experience for me to just go off by myself with 200 and something people from around the world to go build in another country for Habitat Vietnam. And wow, just the relationships I built from that. That was one of the most moving experiences of my life. Not terribly expensive. It's a great way to do travel and do something meaningful and really experience life with the people where you're living, not just be in the cultural trap, but be, you know, in the authentic place where people are living. And just one of the most special experiences I've ever had.
That's so cool. I would love to do that. I was in Southeast Asia in 2019 and was in Vietnam for a little while, and it would be such a special opportunity to be able to go abroad and build for people.
I'm hoping once things pick up again and we're doing global village builds that we can actually organize one here and take a group from Austin to go somewhere. So,
oh, good to know.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Anyone else have any questions out there that they'd like to ask?
Phyllis, I know you've seen so many families get housing through Habitat and worked with so many. I'm wondering if you can share kind of your favorite story of a family that went through the program and got a house. I'm sure there are tons, but every time we are connected with the families, the stories are so incredible and moving, and I'd love to hear one from you.
Thank you. I'm so glad you asked that. there are so many. And so I have a favorite that I love to share because this homeowner is really special to me. But we have a lady that was in the Habitat program before I came. And she was working alongside some UT professors to build a home. And this is someone who had not gotten her GED. So, you know, I can kind of relate to, you know, that experience of not being around people that would inspire you and feeling like these people were above you or being, you know, and so I think part of it for her was seeing how everybody, we're just all people. And so that was just an awakening for her. But every homeowner grows so much through the process because they all come in here thinking that they're stepping into it, but they never really think they're going to do it. I mean, up until the day we give them the keys, they're like, oh, you mean this is mine? Can I actually go there today? You know, it just never hits home for them until they actually move in. It's so amazing, despite all the work that they've done all along the way. And so she gets through all this, pushes through, builds this home, owns this home. And one of the last things one of the professors told her was, you know, how proud they were of her and just to continue her education and just to keep going. If she did this, she could do anything. And that really sat with her. And she went back to school and got her GED, then went and got her bachelor's at Texas State and became a teacher, and then got her master's, and she's now in a PhD program.
Wow.
They've all gone to college. One of them works in Round Rock at a lab. It's just an amazing family, and that perspective changed because she was given an opportunity to work through those insecurities and those doubts, but she put the effort in and did it as a single mom. And I couldn't be any more proud of her, but just super humble, super hardworking, and changed not just her life. You know, a lot of people say, well, Habitat builds one home. It inspired her entire family. It inspired her relatives. I mean, she's inspired so many other people by what she was able to do.
That's incredible. Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, that's a really inspiring story. I love that. Anyone else have any questions out there? Last chance. Well, Phyllis, it has been such a pleasure to have you here today. I feel so inspired. I feel like I could talk to you for hours. I'd love to. I'm sure you've got a million stories about habitat builds all over the world. I'd love to hear more about that. It's just been so great to have you here again during the week of International Women's Day and Women's History Month, and see you as such a strong example of a female leader doing really amazing work in our communities. One of our core values is do the right thing. So it's really, you know, kind of hits home a lot of the stories that you shared with us today. So thank you so much again for your time, and really, really enjoyed having you here, and hope we can have you back again. And that hopefully when this pandemic is behind us, we can help get in the community and get some hands-on volunteer, you know, opportunities with you. So thank you so much again.
We miss you guys. One of our most talented building teams that we have. And I guarantee our construction leaders miss you tremendously. So we look forward to having you back.
Yeah, I bet.
All you do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. And thanks everyone who attended the call.
Thank
And,
you.
everybody be well. Take care.
Thanks so much.